The alarm clock buzzed at 5 in the morning, and Maria's hand shot out from under the thin blanket to silence it. She lay there for just a moment, staring at the ceiling of the tiny bedroom she shared with her mother. The paint was peeling in the corners, and she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's baby crying through the paper-thin walls of their apartment building. She dragged herself out of bed and tiptoed to the bathroom, trying not to wake her mother, who was still sleeping on the worn-out couch in their living room. Maria looked at herself in the cracked mirror. At 23, she already had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to fix. Her uniform for the diner hung on the back of the door, washed so many times that the fabric had gone soft and faded. By 5:30, she was out the door, walking 3 blocks to catch the bus that would take her across town to Rosie's diner. The morning air was cold, and she pulled her jacket tighter around herself. It was the same jacket she'd had since high school, with a small tear in the sleeve that she'd sewn up herself. The diner opened at 6, and Maria was always there 15 minutes early. Her boss, Rosie, appreciated that about her. Rosie was a tough woman in her 60s, who'd run the diner for 30 years. But she had a soft spot for Maria. She knew about Maria's situation at home, about her sick mother, about the bills that never seemed to stop coming. The morning shift was always busy. Truck drivers, construction workers, nurses ending their night shifts. They all came in for coffee and breakfast before starting or ending their long days. Maria moved between tables with practiced efficiency, remembering orders without writing them down, refilling coffee cups before anyone had to ask. Her feet hurt within the first hour, but she'd learned to ignore it. Around noon, a regular customer named old Mr. Patterson left her a $5 tip on a $7 breakfast. Maria's eyes welled up a little. She knew Mr. Patterson lived on a fixed income. These small acts of kindness from people who had so little themselves always touched her deeply. Her mother had raised her to notice these things, to appreciate them, and to pass them forward whenever possible. Her shift ended at 2 in the afternoon. Most days she'd go straight home to check on her mother, make sure she'd taken her medications, prepare dinner for later. Then at 6 in the evening, she'd head to her second job, cleaning offices in the downtown business district until midnight. That's how Maria survived. That's how they paid rent, bought groceries, and slowly chipped away at the mountain of medical debt her father had left behind when he died 7 years ago. But today was different. Today the rain started just as she stepped out of the diner. It wasn't a gentle rain either. Within seconds it was pouring, the kind of rain that soaks through your clothes in minutes. Maria didn't have an umbrella. She'd lent hers to her mother last week, and Mom still had it. She was about to make a run for the bus stop when she noticed him, an old man sitting on the bench right outside the diner. He was completely drenched, his gray hair plastered to his head, water dripping off his nose. His clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks, and he was clutching an old brown briefcase to his chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. People were walking past him quickly, umbrellas up, eyes down. Nobody wanted to stop. Nobody wanted to see him. Maria stood there under the diner's awning watching. She thought about her bus, about getting home to her mother, about how she barely had enough money to get through the week as it was. Then she thought about what her mother always said. "Mija, we might not have much, but we always have enough to share. That's what makes us rich in the ways that matter." Maria walked back into the diner. Rosie looked up, surprised. "Forget something? Can I get a turkey sandwich to go? And a large coffee?" Rosie started making the sandwich, then paused. "This for you, honey?" "It's for someone who needs it more." Rosie looked out the window at the old man on the bench. She didn't say anything, just nodded and made the sandwich a little bigger, added some chips and an apple. When Maria went to pay, Rosie waved her money away. "On the house." "Go on." Maria also grabbed one of the plastic rain ponchos they kept by the door for customers. Then she took a deep breath and stepped back out into the rain. The old man looked up as she approached, his eyes wary. Maria could see he was shaking, whether from cold or fear or something else, she couldn't tell. "Hi," she said, trying to smile warmly despite the rain running down her face. "I thought you might be hungry." She held out the bag with the sandwich and coffee. The man stared at it for a long moment, like he couldn't quite believe it was real. His hands wrinkled and spotted with age, reached out slowly and took the bag. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough and broken. Maria sat down next to him on the wet bench. Ignoring the puddle that immediately soaked through her work pants, she helped him open the poncho and draped it over his shoulders. Up close, she could see he was probably in his 70s, maybe older. His face was weathered and tired, but his eyes were different. They were sharp, intelligent, like they'd seen more than most people ever would. "I'm Maria," she said simply. "Chen," he replied after a moment. "They call me Mr. Chen." He opened the sandwich with trembling fingers and took a bite. Maria watched him eat, noticing how he savored each bite, how carefully he chewed. When was the last time he'd eaten? She wondered. The coffee seemed to help too. Some color came back to his pale face. They sat in silence for a while, just two people on a bench in the rain. Maria knew she was going to be late getting home, knew her mother would worry. But something kept her there. "You're very kind," Mr. Chen said finally. "Most people, they look right through me. Like I'm a ghost. Like I'm not even here." "I see you," Maria said softly. "Everyone deserves to be seen." When Mr. Chen finished eating, Maria reached into her pocket. She had $23. It was supposed to last her until Friday. She pulled out a $10 bill and pressed it into his hand. "Please find somewhere warm tonight. There's a shelter about 6 blocks from here. This should cover the bus fare and maybe a hot meal." Mr. Chen looked at the money, then at Maria, then back at the money. His eyes filled with tears. "I can't take this. You work hard for this money. I can see it in your eyes and your hands. You need this." "So do you," Maria said firmly. "Please, it would make me feel better knowing you're safe tonight." He closed his fingers around the bill slowly, nodding. When he looked up at her again, there was something different in his expression. Something Maria couldn't quite read. It was intense, searching, like he was looking right into her soul. "You have a rare heart, young lady," he said quietly. "That will matter more than you know." Maria didn't understand what he meant by that, but she smiled anyway. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Chen." She stood up, ready to finally head home. As she walked away toward the bus stop, she turned back once. Mr. Chen was still sitting there, watching her go, the poncho around his shoulders and that mysterious briefcase still clutched in his lap. On the bus ride home, Maria's wet clothes stuck to the plastic seat. She was cold, uncomfortable, and knew she'd just made her already tight budget even tighter. But somehow she felt lighter, warmer on the inside, if that made any sense. When she got home, her mother took one look at her and immediately started fussing, bringing towels, making hot tea. "Mija, you're soaked." What happened? As Maria changed into dry clothes and told her mother about Mr. Chen, she saw her mother's expression soften. When she mentioned giving him the $10, her mother pulled her into a tight hug. "Your father would be so proud of you," her mother whispered. "You have his heart, always giving, even when we have so little." That night, as Maria lay in bed trying to fall asleep before her night shift, she thought about Mr. Chen's words. "You have a rare heart?" She didn't feel rare. She just felt like herself, doing what anyone should do when they see someone suffering. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness was the first thread in a tapestry that would completely unravel and reweave her entire life. She had no idea that Mr. Chen was watching, remembering, and planning something that would change everything. All she knew was that tomorrow, she'd probably see him again, and if she did, she'd bring him another sandwich. Maria saw Mr. Chen the next day and the day after that and the day after that. He always sat on the same bench outside Rosie's diner, rain or shine. Sometimes he was there when she arrived in the morning, sometimes when she left in the afternoon. But he was always there. At first, she just brought him food. Leftovers from the diner that would have been thrown away anyway. A coffee when the pot was getting old and needed to be remade. Small things. Things that didn't cost much but seemed to mean everything to him. Then they started talking. Just a few minutes here and there during her breaks. Maria would step outside, sit on that bench, and Mr. Chen would share little pieces of his story. He'd been homeless for 5 years, he told her. Lost everything in what he called bad decisions and worse timing. He never went into details, and Maria never pushed. She figured everyone had a right to their privacy, even people living on the street. "I had a business once," he mentioned one afternoon, staring off into the distance. "Import and export. Brought goods from China to America. Sent American products back. I was good at it too. Made a lot of money." "What happened?" Maria asked gently. Mr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Life happened. Death happened. I made choices that hurt people I loved, and when I needed them most, they weren't there anymore. Can't say I blame them. Maria's co-workers thought she was crazy. During lunch rush one day, Danny, the cook, pulled her aside. You know that old guy's just using you, right? Probably spends whatever money you give him on alcohol. Maybe, Maria said, not really believing it. But that's his choice to make. My choice is whether to help or not. Her friend Lisa, another waitress, was more direct. Girl, you're barely making ends meet yourself. You can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save anyone, Maria replied. I'm just trying to be kind. But it wasn't just about the food and coffee anymore. Maria realized that Mr. Chen was lonely. Really deeply lonely in a way that went beyond just being alone. He was invisible to the world, and that invisibility was slowly erasing him. So she made time, even when she was exhausted from working 2 jobs. Even when her feet hurt and her back ached. She'd sit with him and just listen. Mr. Chen told her about his childhood in Shanghai, about coming to America with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. He told her about his late wife, Linda, and how she used to make him jasmine tea every morning. His voice would crack when he mentioned her. She died 11 years ago, he said one evening. Cancer. I couldn't save her, no matter how much money I threw at doctors and treatments. Turns out some things money can't fix. Maria understood that pain. Her father had died of a heart attack when she was 16. She remembered how helpless she'd felt, watching him in that hospital bed, knowing there was nothing she could do. I have 2 sons and a daughter. Mr. Chen continued another day. Haven't spoken to them in 6 years. They blame me for everything. For not being there when their mother was sick. For being too focused on business. They're not wrong. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Maria arrived at the diner one morning to find Mr. Chen looking worse than usual. His breathing was shallow and raspy, and he couldn't stop coughing. When she touched his forehead during her break, he was burning up with fever. Mr. Chen, you need to see a doctor. He waved her off weakly. No money for doctors. I'll be fine, but he wasn't fine. By afternoon, he could barely sit up straight. Maria made a decision. She called her mother and told her she'd be late. Then she helped Mr. Chen to his feet and half-carried him to the bus stop. The free clinic was on the other side of town. It took them nearly an hour to get there, with Mr. Chen leaning heavily on her shoulder, that briefcase still clutched in his other hand. Maria noticed he never let go of it, even when he was clearly struggling. The waiting room was packed. Crying babies, elderly people, sick kids, everyone there was struggling just like them. Maria checked Mr. Chen in, and they waited. And waited. 3 hours passed before a nurse finally called his name. Maria went in with him because he asked her to, his voice small and scared. The doctor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, examined him thoroughly. Pneumonia. Early stages, but serious for someone his age, especially someone living on the streets. He needs antibiotics, the doctor said, scribbling on a prescription pad, and rest. Real rest in a warm, dry place. The prescription cost $42 at the pharmacy. Maria's heart sank when she saw the price. She'd been saving up to fix the leak in their apartment bathroom, had $80 set aside. She looked at Mr. Chen, who was staring at the floor, defeated. I'll be fine, he muttered. Don't waste your money. Maria pulled out her wallet and handed over the cash. Mr. Chen looked up sharply, his eyes wide. No, absolutely not. I can't let you do this. It's already done, Maria said simply, taking the paper bag with the medication from the pharmacist. On the bus ride back, Mr. Chen was silent. When they reached his usual bench, the sun was setting. Maria helped him sit down and carefully explained how to take the medication. She gave him the rest of her savings, another $38 for food and maybe a few nights at the shelter. Why? Mr. Chen asked, his voice breaking. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I'm nobody. Maria sat down beside him. You're not nobody. You're Mr. Chen. You like jasmine tea and you had a business and you miss your wife. That makes you somebody. Tears rolled down the old man's weathered cheeks. I don't deserve this kindness. The things I've done, the people I've hurt. Everyone deserves kindness, Maria interrupted gently. That's not something you have to earn. It's something we all deserve just for being human. Mr. Chen looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her. Then he did something unexpected. He opened his briefcase. Inside, Maria caught a glimpse of old photographs, yellowed documents, and what looked like business papers. This briefcase, he said softly. It's all I have left from my old life. Everything that mattered. I've been holding on to it, like it could somehow bring everything back. He pulled out a faded photograph and showed it to Maria. A younger version of Mr. Chen stood with a beautiful woman and 3 children in front of a large house. Everyone was smiling. "That's who I used to be," he said, "before I lost my way." Over the next few weeks, as Mr. Chen recovered from his pneumonia, their friendship deepened. He started sharing more stories, more memories. He told her about his proudest business deals, about teaching his daughter to ride a bike, about the time he and his wife renewed their vows on their 20th anniversary. But he also talked about his regrets, how he'd missed his son's college graduation for a business meeting, how he'd been on a trip to Hong Kong when his wife got her cancer diagnosis, how after she died, instead of grieving with his children, he'd buried himself in work even more. They tried to reach out, he admitted one cold morning. "After I lost the business, after I ended up here, my daughter called, left messages. But I was too ashamed, too proud. I couldn't face them as a failure." Maria listened to all of it without judgment. She understood complicated family relationships. Her own mother had siblings who disappeared after her father died, unwilling to help with the medical bills. What she didn't know was that Mr. Chen was watching her too. Not just during their conversations, but other times. He'd see how she treated everyone at the diner with the same respect, whether they were wealthy business people or struggling construction workers. He watched her give her umbrella to a young mother with a baby when it started raining. He saw her defend a teenager when another customer complained about him taking too long to order. One afternoon, as Maria was leaving the diner, she saw Mr. Chen talking to Rosie through the window. It seemed like an odd conversation, intense and serious. When she came outside, both of them stopped talking abruptly. Maria thought it was strange but didn't mention it. "Getting to know the boss?" she asked lightly. Mr. Chen smiled, an expression that seemed to hold secrets. "Just thanking her for the good food and for hiring someone like you." That night, Maria walked home feeling lighter despite her empty wallet. Her mother was waiting up for her, worried as always. When Maria told her about spending their bathroom repair money on Mr. Chen's medicine, she expected disappointment. Instead, her mother hugged her tight. "You did the right thing, Mija. Always trust your heart, but the bathroom will still be there. That man needed help now. Besides," her mother smiled, "I taught you that money comes and goes, but how you treat people stays forever." The next morning, Maria overslept. She rushed to the diner, arriving 10 minutes late. Rosie didn't say anything, just gave her a knowing look. When Maria went to check on Mr. Chen during her first break, he wasn't on his usual bench. Her heart sank. Maybe he'd gotten sick again. Maybe he'd moved on to another part of the city. Maybe something worse had happened. But at lunchtime, there he was, looking better than she'd seen him in weeks. The medication had worked. His color was better, his breathing clear. He even seemed to have a little more energy. "You saved my life," he said when she brought him lunch. "I hope you know that." "The doctor saved your life," Maria corrected. "I just helped you get there." "No," Mr. Chen insisted, his eyes intense. "You saved my life in ways you don't understand yet. You reminded me that there's still good in this world, that there are still people who care about others more than themselves." There was something in his tone that made Maria pause, something deeper than simple gratitude. But before she could ask what he meant, a customer called for her from inside the diner. "I have to go," she said, standing up. "Maria," Mr. Chen called as she turned to leave. She looked back. "Promise me something. Promise me you'll never stop being who you are. Never let the world make you hard, I promise," she said, confused by the serious tone but meaning it anyway. As she walked back into the diner, Maria had no idea that Mr. Chen had just made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She didn't know that he'd been making phone calls from the shelter, reaching out to lawyers, setting things in motion. All she knew was that she'd helped someone who needed help. And in her mind, that was enough. That was everything. That was just being human. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Maria woke up with an uneasy feeling in her chest, the kind that makes you check your phone 3 times and count your family members to make sure everyone's okay. She tried to shake it off as she got ready for work. The diner was unusually quiet that morning. Even the regular coffee crowd seemed subdued. Maria moved through her tables mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When her break came at 10, she went outside expecting to see Mr. Chen on his usual bench. The bench was empty. She stood there for a moment, telling herself not to panic. Maybe he'd found a day job. Maybe he was at the shelter. Maybe he was just running late. But that anxious feeling in her chest grew stronger. Maria went back inside and threw herself into work, but she kept glancing at the window. Lunch rush came and went. Still no Mr. Chen. By 2 o'clock, when her shift was ending, Maria was genuinely worried. "He's probably fine," Lisa said, noticing her concern. "Homeless folks move around. It's what they do." But Maria knew Mr. Chen. He'd been coming to that same spot every single day for months. Something was wrong. She was untying her apron when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Maria Santos?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes, this is Maria. This is Dr. Patel from Metro General Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for a patient named Mr. Chen. He was brought in by ambulance this morning." Maria's blood went cold. "Is he okay? What happened?" "He collapsed on the street. His heart. Can you come to the hospital?" Maria didn't remember the bus ride to Metro General. 1 minute she was in the diner. The next she was running through hospital corridors following signs to the cardiac unit. A nurse directed her to room 412. The man in the bed didn't look like the Mr. Chen she knew. He looked smaller, older, hooked up to machines that beeped and hummed. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Chen?" she whispered, approaching the bed. His eyes opened slowly. When he saw her, something like relief crossed his face. "Maria, you came." "Of course I came." She pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines. His skin felt paper-thin, fragile. "What did the doctors say?" "My heart is giving out." His voice was weak but steady. "They say I don't have much time. Days, maybe a week if I'm lucky." "No." Maria shook her head, tears already forming. "No, you're going to be fine. They can do surgery or medication or—" "Maria." Mr. Chen squeezed her hand gently. "I'm 78 years old. I've lived on the streets for 5 years. My body is tired. I'm tired. Don't say that. Please don't say that." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the steady beep of the heart monitor. Finally, Mr. Chen spoke again. "I need to tell you something. Actually, I need to show you something." He gestured weakly toward the small closet in the corner. "My briefcase. Can you get it?" Maria retrieved the worn brown briefcase she'd seen him carry every single day. It felt heavier than she expected. She brought it back to the bed. "Open it," Mr. Chen said. With trembling fingers, Maria unlatched the briefcase. Inside were the things she'd glimpsed before. Old photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. But there was also a sealed envelope with her name written on it in shaky handwriting. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "The truth," Mr. Chen said simply. "The truth about who I really am and what I want you to know before I die." Maria pulled out the envelope but didn't open it yet. She looked at Mr. Chen, waiting. "My full name is David Chen," he began, his voice growing stronger as he talked, like he'd been waiting to tell this story. 20 years ago, I owned one of the most successful import-export companies in the city. Chen International Trading. We had offices in 5 countries, over 200 employees. I was worth over $30 million. Maria's hand froze on the envelope. She stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "I had everything," David continued. "Money, success, respect. A beautiful wife named Linda, who was far better than I deserved. 3 children who I barely knew because I was always working, always traveling, always chasing the next big deal." He paused, his breathing labored. The monitor's beeping seemed louder in the silence. "When Linda got sick, really sick, I finally slowed down. Spent every day with her for 8 months. Those were the best 8 months of my life. Even though I was watching her die, she made me promise that I'd reconnect with our kids, that I'd finally be the father I should have been." Tears were running down his weathered face now. "But after she died, I couldn't do it. The grief was too much. So I did what I always did. I worked harder, longer, made more deals. My kids tried to talk to me, tried to help me grieve. I pushed them away, told them to leave me alone, said terrible things I can never take back." Maria listened, her own tears falling silently. "My daughter Karen stopped calling after I missed her wedding for a business trip to Singapore. My younger son Robert tried for another year, but I was too far gone in my grief and anger. My older son Daniel wrote me a letter saying he couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. That was 6 years ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. What happened to your business? Maria asked softly. David's laugh was bitter. I stopped caring. Made bad decisions. Trusted the wrong partners. Within 2 years, everything collapsed. Debts, lawsuits, bankruptcy. I lost it all. But you could have started over. With your experience, I didn't want to, David interrupted. I felt like I deserved to lose everything. Like it was punishment for being such a terrible husband and father. So when I ended up on the streets, I stayed there. It felt right somehow. Like finally accepting who I really was. A man who'd gained the world but lost his soul. The heart monitor beeped faster, and David winced in pain. Maria reached for the call button, but he stopped her. Wait, I need to finish. He took several shallow breaths. For 5 years I lived like you saw me, forgotten, invisible, alone. I thought I'd die that way. Thought I deserved to. And then one rainy day a young woman gave me a sandwich and sat with me in the rain. He looked directly at Maria. His eyes clear despite his pain. At first I thought it was just charity, a nice gesture from a kind person. But you kept coming back. You kept treating me like a human being. You gave me your lunch money when you could barely afford food yourself. You paid for my medicine when you needed that money for your own family. Anyone would have done that, Maria whispered. No, David said firmly. No, they wouldn't have. I watched you, Maria. Not just with me, but with everyone. I saw how you treated the angry customer who yelled at you with patience and understanding. I saw you give your tips to the dishwasher when his daughter was sick. I saw you defend people who couldn't defend themselves. He reached for the envelope in her hands. Open it, please. Maria's fingers shook as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, several legal documents, and what looked like property deeds. What is all this? She asked, her voice barely audible. Everything I had left, David said. Before my business completely collapsed, I moved some assets into a private trust. Properties, investments. I hid them away, thinking maybe someday I'd want to start over. But I never did. Those assets had been sitting there for 6 years, growing. Maria looked at the papers, not understanding. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to have them. The words hung in the air between them. Maria's brain refused to process what she'd just heard. What? Oh no, I can't. Mr. Chen, these belong to your children. My children, David said, his voice sad but steady. Have their own lives. They're all successful in their own ways. They don't need my money, and they certainly don't want it. Not from me. Not after everything I did. But I'm nobody, Maria protested. I'm just a waitress who brought you sandwiches. David's expression softened. You're not nobody, Maria. You're the person who showed a forgotten old man that kindness still exists in the world. You're the person who gave everything you had to someone who had nothing. You're the person my wife would have loved. The monitor started beeping erratically. A nurse rushed in, checking David's vitals. His heart rate is too high. I need you to step out for a moment. No, David gasped. Please, just a few more minutes. The nurse looked uncertain but nodded. Just a few minutes. Then you need to rest. When they were alone again, David continued, his voice weaker now. The letter explains everything. There's a lawyer, Mr. Harrison. He's been managing the trust. I've been in contact with him for the past month, since you saved my life with that doctor visit. I've had you investigated, Maria. Investigated? Maria felt a chill. Not in a bad way. I needed to be sure. Sure that what I saw in you was real. That your kindness wasn't an act, wasn't manipulation. Mr. Harrison hired investigators. They watched you. Talked to your neighbors, your co-workers, your friends. Everyone said the same thing. Maria Santos is one of the kindest people they've ever met. He was struggling to breathe now, but he pushed on. The trust is worth about $2.5 million. There are 3 commercial properties, some stocks, bonds. It's all yours. The paperwork is already filed. My lawyer has everything ready. Maria couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The numbers were too big, too impossible. This couldn't be real. Why? She finally managed. Why me? David's eyes filled with tears again. Because you reminded me what my wife always tried to teach me. That the measure of a person isn't in their bank account or their success. It's in how they treat others when they have nothing to gain. You had nothing, Maria. You were struggling, but you still gave. You still cared. That's worth more than all the money I ever made. I can't accept this, Maria said, crying openly now. It's too much. Your children should have this. I've left them something in the will, David assured her. Enough to be comfortable, but the bulk of it goes to you. And Maria, there's a condition. What condition? That you promise me you'll use it to keep doing what you do. Keep being kind. Keep helping people. Maybe start something that helps others the way you helped me. A foundation, a charity, something that matters. Can you promise me that? Maria looked at this dying man, this person who'd been invisible to the world but who'd seen her more clearly than almost anyone. How could she say no? I promise, she whispered. David smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Good, that's good. Now I can let go. No. Maria gripped his hand tighter. Don't talk like that. You're going to be okay. But they both knew that wasn't true. The monitor's beeping was becoming more irregular. David's breathing was shallower. One more thing, he said, his voice barely audible now. In the briefcase. The photos, keep them. Remember that I was once a man who was loved. Who loved? Tell my story so others know that it's never too late to recognize goodness in the world, even if it's too late to become good yourself. You are good, Maria insisted. You're a good person, Mr. Chen. David, you are. He squeezed her hand one last time. Because of you, I gotta remember what that felt like. Thank you, Maria Santos. Thank you for seeing me. His eyes closed. The monitor's beeping slowed, then became a steady tone. Nurses and doctors rushed in. Maria was pushed back out into the hallway as they tried to save him. But she knew. She already knew. David Chen died at 4:47 that afternoon, holding the memory of kindness, finally at peace. Maria sat in the hospital waiting room long after they'd covered David Chen's body with a white sheet and wheeled him away. She sat there holding his briefcase, staring at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened. A nurse brought her water. A doctor offered condolences. But Maria barely heard them. Her mother found her there 2 hours later after Maria had finally managed to call her. One look at her daughter's face and she knew. She didn't ask questions, just wrapped Maria in her arms and let her cry. That night, Maria couldn't sleep. She kept seeing David's face, kept hearing his words. She opened the briefcase again and really looked at everything inside. The photographs showed a life fully lived. David and Linda on their wedding day, young and glowing with hope. The children as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers. Family vacations, birthday parties, graduations. A whole life documented in fading images. The legal documents were harder to understand. Property deeds, stock certificates, bank statements, numbers that didn't seem real. Maria's hands trembled as she read through them. $2.5 million. It was more money than she could imagine. More than her father had made in his entire life. The letter from David was 3 pages long, handwritten. In it, he explained everything again, but with more detail. He told her about each property, what it was worth, how the trust was structured. He'd thought of everything. There were instructions, suggestions, but no demands. Only that one request. Use it to help others. At the end of the letter, he'd written, "Don't feel guilty about this gift. Maria, you earned it not through manipulation or expectation, but through the simple act of being genuinely good. The world needs more people like you. This is my way of making sure you have the resources to keep being that person." 3 days later, Maria attended David Chen's funeral. It was held at a small chapel on the outskirts of the city. She arrived early, expecting to be alone or maybe with a few people from the shelter. Instead, she found the parking lot already filling up. Inside the chapel, Maria stopped short. In the front row sat 3 people she'd never met but somehow recognized from the photographs. David's children. They were older now, adults in their 40s and 50s, but she could still see their faces from those family pictures. The daughter, Karen, looked like her mother. Same delicate features, same sad eyes. The 2 sons, Daniel and Robert, were tall like their father had been in his younger days. All 3 wore expensive suits and blank expressions. They turned when Maria entered and she saw something flash across their faces. Recognition, anger? She couldn't tell. Maria slipped into a back pew clutching the briefcase. She'd brought it because it felt wrong to leave it at home. These were David's memories, his life. His children should have them. The service was brief. A priest who'd clearly never met David read generic passages about eternal rest and peace. No one stood up to speak. No one shared memories. It was the saddest funeral Maria had ever attended, and she'd been to several. As people filed out, Maria stayed in her seat. She was gathering courage to approach David's children when they approached her instead. Karen reached her first. Up close, Maria could see she'd been crying, though her face was set in hard lines. "You're Maria Santos, it wasn't a question." Maria stood up slowly. "Yes, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was—" "Our father," Daniel interrupted, his voice cold, "was a stranger to us for the last 6 years, so forgive us if we're not drowning in grief." "Daniel," Robert said quietly. But his brother ignored him. "We know who you are," Daniel continued, stepping closer. "The lawyer contacted us. Told us about the will." "About you?" Maria's stomach dropped. "I didn't know. I swear I had no idea about any of it until 3 days ago when he was in the hospital." "Really?" Karen's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You expect us to believe that you just happened to befriend a homeless man who just happened to be worth millions, and you had no idea?" "I didn't," Maria insisted, her voice shaking. "I just saw someone who needed help. That's all." "How convenient," Daniel said. "How very convenient that you helped him just enough to work your way into his will." "That's not what happened," Maria protested, but she could see they didn't believe her. Robert spoke for the first time, his voice quieter but no less angry. "Do you know what it's like to lose your father twice, once to his work and again to his pride? We tried for years to reconnect with him. Years, he pushed us away every single time." "I know," Maria said softly. "He told me. He regretted it so much." "Oh, he told you?" Karen laughed bitterly. "He told you about his regrets? He shared his feelings with you?" "He never did that with us. Not once in our entire lives." Maria didn't know what to say. What could she say that wouldn't sound defensive or make things worse? "We're contesting the will," Daniel announced. "Our lawyer is already working on it. You took advantage of an elderly man in a vulnerable state. We'll prove it." "I didn't take advantage of anyone," Maria said, finding her voice. "You can have it all. The money, the properties, everything. I don't want it here." She held out the briefcase. "These are his things. His photos, his memories. They should belong to you." Karen stared at the briefcase but didn't take it. "Keep it. Clearly you meant more to him than we did, at least according to his will." They turned to leave. Maria called after them. "He loved you. All of you. He talked about you all the time, about your mother, about the family he'd lost. He was drowning in regret." Daniel turned back, his face red with anger. "If he loved us so much, why did he give millions to a stranger? Why did you get the father we never had? Why were you worth changing for when we weren't?" Then they were gone, leaving Maria standing alone in the empty chapel with a briefcase full of memories and a heart full of guilt. The next morning, Maria met with Mr. Harrison, David's lawyer. His office was in a tall building downtown, the kind of place Maria had never had reason to visit before. The receptionist looked at her worn clothes and old shoes with barely concealed disdain. But Mr. Harrison himself was kind. He was an older gentleman, probably in his 60s, with silver hair and patient eyes. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his massive desk. "First, let me say how sorry I am for your loss. David spoke very highly of you." "Thank you," Maria managed. "Mr. Harrison, about the will. Please call me Tom." He opened a thick folder. "I imagine you have questions." "I want to give it back," Maria blurted out. "The inheritance. I want his children to have it." "It's not right." Tom Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her. "David said you'd say that. He did? He knew you, Maria. Better than you might think. He spent a month having you investigated, yes, but more than that, he spent 3 months observing you, watching how you lived your life. He told me that you were exactly the kind of person who would try to give everything back." Tom opened the folder and pulled out a document. "This is a letter David left specifically for this conversation. He asked me to read it to you if you tried to refuse the inheritance." He cleared his throat and began to read. "Dear Maria, if you're hearing this, it means you're trying to give away what I've given you. I expected this because it's who you are. You're reading this letter in Tom's office, probably feeling guilty, probably thinking about my children and how unfair this must seem. Let me tell you why you're wrong. My children are successful. Daniel is a surgeon. Karen is a lawyer. Robert owns a tech company. They don't need my money. They needed a father, and I failed to be that. No amount of money will fix what I broke. But you, Maria, you need this, not because you're greedy or because you asked for it, but because people like you shouldn't have to work themselves to death just to survive. You shouldn't have to choose between your own health and helping others. This money is my way of making sure you can keep being who you are without suffering for it. I know my children are angry. I know they blame you, let them. They need someone to be angry at, and it's easier to be angry at you than at a dead man. But don't you dare let their anger make you refuse this gift. That would dishonor everything you did for me, everything you showed me about kindness and humanity. Take the money, Maria. Use it well.
Help people the way you helped me.
And please don't feel guilty. You earned this through nothing but being yourself, and that's the rarest thing in the world. With gratitude, David Chen. Tom finished reading and looked up at Maria, who was crying silently. David was very clear about his wishes. The will is ironclad. I made sure of that. His children can contest it, and they are, but they won't win. David was of sound mind. We have video recordings of him explaining his decisions. We have testimony from multiple doctors, from me, from people at the shelter. The will stands, but they hate me, Maria whispered. They think I manipulated him. They're grieving, Tom said gently. And grief often looks like anger. Give them time. Maybe they'll come around, maybe they won't. But that's not your burden to carry. Over the next 4 months, the legal battle consumed Maria's life. David's children hired an expensive law firm. They filed motion after motion, claiming their father had been mentally incompetent, that Maria had exerted undue influence, that the will was invalid. Maria had to give depositions. Answer questions. Relive every interaction with David while lawyers tried to twist her words into evidence of manipulation. It was exhausting and humiliating, but Tom Harrison was good at his job. He'd prepared for every possibility. Witnesses came forward. Rosie from the diner testified about Maria's character, about how she'd helped David long before she knew who he was. The doctor from the free clinic testified that Maria had spent her own money on David's medication. People from the shelter, other homeless individuals Maria had helped over the years, all spoke on her behalf. The investigators David had hired presented their findings. Weeks of surveillance showing Maria's daily life, working 2 jobs, caring for her mother, helping neighbors, giving away what little she had. There was no evidence of manipulation because there had been no manipulation. Most damning of all was David's own video testimony, recorded 2 weeks before he died. Sitting in Tom Harrison's office, looking directly at the camera, David Chen explained every decision. He talked about his children, about his regrets, about why he was leaving them a modest inheritance instead of everything. He talked about Maria, about what her kindness had meant to him, about why he wanted her to have the bulk of his estate. This is not about punishing my children, David said in the video. This is about rewarding genuine goodness. Maria Santos represents everything I failed to be. Selfless, kind, compassionate. She gave everything when she had nothing. She helped me when no one else would. If I can't leave my legacy to my children because of my own failures, then I choose to leave it to someone who will use it the way my late wife would have wanted. Someone who will help others. Someone who makes the world better just by being in it. The judge watched the video in chambers. When the proceedings resumed, the verdict was clear. The will was valid. Maria Santos was the legal heir to David Chen's estate. David's children sat in the courtroom as the judge delivered the ruling. Maria watched them from across the room. Karen was crying. Daniel stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Robert looked defeated, older somehow. As everyone filed out, Maria made a decision. She approached them one last time. "Wait," she called. "Please." They stopped, turned. Daniel's expression was hostile, but Robert looked merely tired. "I know you hate me," Maria began. "I know you think I stole your father from you. But I want you to know something. Every single day that I knew him, he talked about you. He showed me pictures. He told me stories. About Karen's first violin recital. About Daniel winning his first surgery award. About Robert's college graduation." She pulled out the briefcase, opened it, and took out the photographs. "These belong to you, your memories, your family. I don't have any right to them." She held out the stack of photos. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Karen reached out and took them. She looked at the top photo. A young Linda Chen smiling at the camera, holding baby Karen in her arms. Karen's hand trembled. "He loved you," Maria continued, her voice breaking. "He loved you so much. He just didn't know how to show it. He was broken by grief and pride, and by the time he figured out how to be human again, he thought it was too late. But he never stopped loving you." "If he loved us," Daniel said, his voice harsh, "he would have left us more than money. He would have left us him. You're right, Maria agreed. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry you didn't get the father you deserved. I'm sorry he gave up on himself and on you. I'm sorry that a stranger got the version of him you'd been waiting for your whole lives. There was a long silence. Then Robert spoke, his voice soft. Was he happy? At the end, Maria thought about David in that hospital bed, about the peace on his face when he closed his eyes for the last time. Yes, she said honestly. I think he finally found some peace. Robert nodded slowly. Karen clutched the photos to her chest. Daniel turned and walked away, but the other two stayed a moment longer. We don't forgive you, Karen said. But maybe we can stop hating you. It wasn't much, but it was something. And as Maria watched them leave, she realized that David had given her more than money. He'd given her a responsibility, not just to help others, but to somehow bridge the gap between a father and his children, even after death. She didn't know how she'd do it. But she'd promised David she'd try, and Maria Santos always kept her promises. 6 months after the will was settled, Maria found herself sitting in the office of a non-profit consultant, feeling completely out of her depth. The inheritance was real. The money had transferred. She'd quit her cleaning job but kept working at the diner part-time because Rosie needed her, and because Maria needed to feel like herself. She'd bought a modest house in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, just enough space for her and her mother to be comfortable. Her mother had cried when they moved in, kept touching the walls like she couldn't believe they were real. For the first time in years, they had heat that worked and a bathroom that didn't leak. But the rest of the money sat in the trust, waiting. Maria had barely touched it, paralyzed by the weight of responsibility. How do you honor a dying man's wish? How do you use money to make the world better when you've spent your whole life just trying to survive? The key, the consultant, a woman named Patricia, was saying, is to start with what you know. What are you passionate about? What problems did you see in your own life that you want to solve for others? Maria thought about the free clinic where she'd taken David, the 3-hour wait with sick people sitting on hard plastic chairs. She thought about the homeless people she'd met through David, about their stories and struggles. She thought about her mother's medical bills, about how healthcare costs had buried her family in debt. Healthcare, she said slowly. I want to help people who can't afford healthcare, but not just emergency care. I want to help them before things get that bad. Over the next 6 months, Maria worked with lawyers, consultants, and doctors to create the Chen Foundation. She named it after David, wanting his legacy to be about helping people, not about a failed business or broken family relationships. The foundation would provide free preventive health care to homeless individuals and working poor families. Mobile clinics would go out into the streets offering basic checkups, medication, mental health services. It would help people before they ended up in emergency rooms with problems that could have been prevented. Maria threw herself into the work. She visited other nonprofits, learned how they operated, what worked and what didn't. She met with city officials, healthcare providers, insurance companies. It was overwhelming and exhausting. But for the first time since David died, she felt like she was honoring his memory properly. The foundation launched on what would have been David's 79th birthday. They started with one mobile clinic and a small team of nurses and social workers. Maria was there every day, despite having hired an executive director who probably could have handled things without her. She couldn't stay away. This was too important. On the first day, they parked the mobile clinic in the same area where David used to sit. Maria had chosen the location deliberately. A line formed quickly. Elderly people, young mothers with children, men and women wearing the weathered faces of hard lives. One of the first people in line was a woman around Maria's age, holding a feverish toddler. How much does it cost? She asked nervously. Nothing, Maria said, smiling despite her own nervousness. Everything is free. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Really? I've been so worried. I can't afford to miss work to take him to the hospital.